directly harvested like this in terms of how do we know that they're not harboring things like lead, harmful toxins, things that they might pick up from the environment of the plants. And I think you have such a great explanation of really what for me is the absolute competitive difference above all things with Arbonne. So I'll let you explain because you've got a smart way to say it.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll start by saying, of course, with the heavy metals, of course, we wish that it was nothing. We wish that it was zero. You know, for my kids, they're 6 and 8. I wish that it was nothing. I think about that, you know, fairly frequently. But the truth is that it's everywhere. It's in the soil. It's in the water. It's in fruits and vegetables. It's, you know, it's just part of the earth. So what we can do is try to manage our, you know, how much we're taking in our diet and manage the safety in our products. And the way that we do that is we test every single lot of every nutrition product for heavy metals. And that is above and beyond industry standard. And that's something that we have chosen as a company to do to ensure the safety of our products for, you know, our own quality standards and also for people that are consuming them. So for example, the FDA didn't come to Arbonne and tell us, oh, matcha has problems, so you have to test heavy metals on every single lot. Now, there are certain standards established. They're called good manufacturing practice that is established by the FDA. All manufacturers of nutrition products should be following this, but it's largely left up to the company to determine how they're going to mitigate these risks, how they're going to ensure that their products don't have anything in them, for example, like lead. If they don't dictate how often it needs to be tested, that's up to us. And some companies take a risk-based approach. They test the first few, they determine that it's fine, and then they will maybe test 1 or 2 throughout the year. That is acceptable. Now we, again, like I said, we go above and beyond, and instead of doing that, we test every single lot. So every lot of matcha has been tested for arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. We choose those 4 because those are the 4 that are most likely to cause harm to human health. So we test every single lot of that, and so you can be assured that they are well below certain established limits by USP. We test every lot. It's reviewed by our quality team. They look at every C of A and they review all of the results before the product gets released.
So let's just go back a minute because you said a couple of really important things that
I kind of said a lot.
You said a lot, but it was all super, super important. So the testing that we do is really extraordinary. For me, this is something I've bragged about for as long as I've been here because it is so far above and beyond what required standards might be. And so if you could speak to that, and also I think there's been some comments when we talk about what is tolerable in the formula. I think you guys, I'll let Laura explain it in her science way, but we're talking about parts per million, like microscopic amounts. Anything more than that, and that's where all that testing comes in, and it just gets rejected. But Laura, if you could just explain a little bit more. I said thousands of tests a year earlier when we spoke, and you said it might be closer to millions of tests a year.
Yes, I would say, you know, based on the number of lots, and you take into account the ingredients. So not only is the finished good tested before release, but the raw materials, the ingredients are all tested before they get approved to go into the final product. So you add all the testing on the ingredients, all the testing on the finished goods. It's hundreds of thousands of tests every year if you take our products into account, possibly in the millions. I wouldn't be surprised. For example, the most recent lot of matcha had 34 tests conducted on it. And fizz, now fizz is something we've done for years, decades. We've had fizz for so long, we have so much historical data, but just a recent lot of fizz, we had 28 tests on our fizz, and that also included heavy metals. Now I know we're focusing on the matcha, so that's just an example. But yes, it's tested extensively. And when I say testing, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I want to talk about how it's third-party tested. Now, if you've heard this term, you probably heard a lot of people say that. And just to be clear, so third-party tested means that it is sent to a lab. So the manufacturer does not test the heavy metals. They send it to a third-party lab, usually in a different state, that has no stake in whether or not this test passes or fails. So they simply test it and report the number. So that means they're independent. that person, this lab, they don't care if it passes, I already said that, but they don't care if it passes or fails, they have no stake in it. Some people might question, well, if the people making it test it, then how do you ensure that there's nothing is being doctored? And that's how you ensure it, you send it to a third-party lab. And that's what we do with all of our heavy metals testing. It's not tested by the manufacturer, it's tested by a third-party lab.
That's perfect. And when you're talking about a lot, that's really just a batch, right? So each batch of the product that comes out of the manufacturing facility.
So, yeah, that kind of depends on how the manufacturer determines their lots or their batching. Typically, trying to explain it without getting too much into like the manufacturing side of it, but typically it'll all go into a large blender, and then that's considered a lot. Everything that went into that blender that was mixed, that's one lot. And then they run it and they package it, and then if there's another blender, if for example, if it's not big enough, they have to run maybe a second blender and they have to package it again, that's another lot. Whatever was in that second blender is a new lot number. So each of those will be tested.
That's perfect. I think that really helps everybody to get a better sense. And we're talking about matcha, but there was recently a study about plant-based protein powders that's gotten a lot of attention from different people in our field, hearing about it from their clients that saw it as well, because CNN picked up on it. And Dr. Mark Harmon picked up on it. But I think, again, when you read the details of the study, and Laura, you can speak to this more specifically, but what stood out to me is that organic plant-based proteins actually scored overall the worst, because at the end of the day, organic is a farming method, which is better than anything. I'm the first girl, I've always said this to you guys, running over in the grocery store to get my organic fruits and veggies, because I don't have a testing lab. So it's certainly better to start there. But when you have third-party testing and validation, again, in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of tests every year, what really matters isn't the farming technique, it's the testing to ensure the safety and the efficacy of the ingredients. Wouldn't you say, Laura?
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. You know, fruits and vegetables, again, we're not testing those when we get them from the grocery store, but those probably have some type of heavy metals in them, almost certainly, because they come from the ground. And that usually can't be controlled as much as we wish that it could. It can't. So we ensure that every lot, every batch is meeting the heavy metals requirements by our testing. And like I said, it's every single lot, and we don't skip it. We don't reduce tests is another kind of term that we say on the quality side. It's done on every single lot. So unlike your fruits and vegetables, which aren't being tested, you know that what is coming from our protein is meeting the limits that are established. Again, I mentioned USP. Those limits that are established, and like you said, it's parts per million. So if you imagine a million M&Ms, imagine how many M&Ms that would be. I don't even know where they would, it's a lot. So imagine a million M&Ms, and our testing is on almost every batch of matcha. I can tell you it's below 1. I'm not gonna get into all the results, but it's below 1, usually below 0.5. So think of 1 million M&Ms, and you have 1/2 of 1 M&M in that entire million that is potentially that you have to go find, or that is maybe old or dusty that you don't want to eat. That's what it's like. So less than 1 out of a million.
And I think, again, it comes down to